Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to discuss the quickly emerging and important topic of bike sharing, and perhaps more importantly, its relationship to existing transportation systems and public transportation. This is Matthew Lesh at the Office of Mobility Innovation at the Federal Transit Administration at the U.S. Department of Transportation headquarters in Washington, D.C. Within the Office of Mobility Innovation, we work with industry and academia to explore new clean propulsion systems, new operational strategies, and innovative techniques to drive transit ridership. One way we understand how to drive ridership is making our communities more livable and providing greater access to public transportation. Increasingly, the topic of the first and last mile issue, or providing mobility options or access to and around public transportation, arises. We hope this is the first of a series of webinars over the course of this year that we will host that will attempt to address this issue of the first and last mile issue. Today we'll be focused on bike sharing. First, I'd like to thank our host at the Center for Urban Transportation Research in the University of South Florida, Phil Winters, and then I want to introduce our two speakers today. The first presentation will be delivered by Dr. Susan Shaheen. Dr. Shaheen is a lecturer and co-director of the Transportation Sustainability Research Center at the University of California, Berkeley. She has been studying innovative mobility options for over 15 years, including car sharing, bike sharing, and ride sharing. She has served on the ITS World Congress Program Committee since 2002 and was the chair of the Emerging and Innovative Public Transport and Technologies Committee of the Transportation Research Board from 2004 to 2011. She will be followed by my colleague here, Mr. Darren Buck. He works and serves as a transportation program specialist with us at the US DOT and is currently on detail from Federal Highway Administration to FTA to work on bicycle and other first last mile transportation issues. He previously worked in the bicycle industry as a program manager for a small federal socioeconomic program for employment of people with disabilities, and earned his MBA from the University of Maryland School of Business. He is currently studying bicycle transportation planning at the Virginia Tech Alexandria campus. So I want to welcome these two speakers, appreciate their participation, really appreciate you tuning in to us this afternoon. And without further ado, I'll launch Dr. Shaheen's presentation, and we will wait until the conclusion of both presentations for a question and answer period. So again, thank you and good afternoon. Dr. Shaheen.
Okay, there it is. I was just looking for the PowerPoint. So good afternoon, everyone. And I would first like to start by just thanking Matthew Lesh of FTA and Phil Winters of Qatar at the University of South Florida for inviting me to be part of this webinar today. And I'm excited to present some research that we have been doing ongoing for a number of years at the University of California, Berkeley on bike sharing. And what I'm going to be sharing today are a lot of the lessons learned from around the world, but also augmenting this research with new lessons and understanding from across North America. So this is an overview of the presentation. So I'm going to start with a definition of public bike sharing, as well as a discussion of the 4 generations of bike sharing. I'm going to give you a sense of where global activity is to date, and then launch into a discussion of 6 key areas, including business models, launch considerations, and expansion, bicycle management, safety and infrastructure, technology, and linkages to public transit. So that's the overview of what I'll be covering in the presentation today. So as I mentioned, I wanted to start with the definition of public bike sharing. So an important thing to mention is that the research that we've undertaken at UC Berkeley does not include an assessment of university or business bike sharing programs that are typically closed to the general public. So what we're focusing on in our research is what we call public bike sharing, which is a form of sustainable public transit. What distinguishes it is its short-term use, and typically trips are under 30 minutes and under 3 miles. and it typically targets daily mobility, and also a lot of tourists we're finding from anecdotal evidence across North America. It is facilitated by information technology, so electronic and wireless systems that facilitate the reservations, bike pickup, and bike drop-off. As I mentioned, I wanted to just give a little bit of historical background on bike sharing. So many of you may be familiar with the white bike systems of the first generation, which launched in Amsterdam in 1965 with 50 bikes, and those 50 bikes quickly disappeared. What happened there is a lot of people enjoyed using the bikes, but the bikes were often vandalized or just stolen. So quickly the police came in and basically took those bikes away. It wasn't until 30 years later in Copenhagen in 1995 that the second generation coin deposit systems appeared, and these addressed concerns about theft and required that individuals insert a coin. But the problem there was that individuals were not directly linked to those bikes, so those bikes may not ever come back. And then in 1998, we saw the first third generation system appear in Rennes, France, and that basically deployed real-time information and ITS technologies, intelligent transportation system technologies, to help administer these systems. So essentially it started to really give more user accountability. People were using credit cards or debit cards to access these systems, and it really ensured that the bikes made it back. So one of the really popular third-generation systems that you might be familiar with or heard about is the Vélib system, which launched in Paris, which currently has about 20,000 bikes and 1,400 stations. And there's much larger systems that I'll talk about in the next slide. The fourth generation system is a system that we see at UC Berkeley is on the horizon, which is more demand responsive and more multimodal. So it's very much integrated with other modes. I'll be talking about this at the very end of the presentation, and involves clean docking stations and solar recharging and GPS tracking and a lot more technology overall, including the integration of electric bikes. And in fact, I'm really delighted to be involved in a new program in conjunction with the city Carshare in the San Francisco Bay Area, where we're actually going to be testing a car sharing, electric bike sharing shared program that is funded by the Value Pricing Pilot Program of the Federal Highway Administration. So theft has really actually become less of an issue more and more with the third generation systems. And even in North America, there's been very little evidence of bikes being stolen. And I think this is a large part due to the developments in the bike systems that make them very roadworthy and able to sustain theft attempts. Minneapolis had just one bike stolen in 2011, and Capital Bikeshare's theft rate is, I believe, less than 1%. Now, moving on to global activity. As of spring of 2011, we accounted for 136 bike sharing programs in approximately 160 cities around the world, with over 236,000 bikes and 13,000 plus stations worldwide. Now, those numbers have definitely changed, and they're changing as we speak. A couple really large programs that I wanted to mention to you include one that we had an opportunity to conduct a user evaluation of in Hangzhou, China, that has 50,000 bikes and over 2,400 stations. But it has now lost its crown as the largest bike sharing program in the world to Wuhan, China, which has 70,000 bicycles and over 1,200 sites for obtaining a bicycle. So it just gives you a little bit of context on what's going on around the world. I'm going to present a figure that we recently put together to show the diffusion of third-generation bike sharing programs in North America through December 2011. This tracks initial program startups, and what you can see is a really big change from 2009 to 2010 and then moving into 2011. There are so many programs planned for launches in 2012. It's rather exciting, and we're looking forward to tracking those. In the next slide, you'll see North American activity, and what we're just showing in this slide is what program, the date in which the programs launched, and this takes us from 2009 to 2011. And it shows in the blue the original number of bicycles that were deployed, and in the red, the increase in the number of bicycles that have been deployed. And so that just gives you a sense of how they're growing over time, given our limited time scale at this point. Next, I'm going to move into a discussion of business models. And there's a range of providers out there, ranging from local governments to transport agencies, advertising companies, for-profit and non-profit companies around the world. And there's a wide range of funding sources, and we're starting to see much more diversification in this area, particularly in North America. And these include advertising. You've probably heard about the JC2Co and Clear Channel efforts of the past, where advertising companies are coming in and providing those services. We're also seeing large corporate sponsorships and public-private grants and loan financing. And just a couple examples include Nice Ride's $1.25 million sponsorship in its first year, and Boulder B-Cycle's federal grants of $250,000 from the city of Boulder. Programs must carefully evaluate before they launch what type of operational model they're interested in pursuing. And worldwide, we see three different models. Public agency owns and operates the service. Second, the public agency owns, but a private company operates the service. And third, a private company owns the company and operates the service. And in North America, the typical operators and typical model is actually number two. And some of the key operators are Alta and B-Cycle, which you might be familiar with. In terms of model number one, the public agency owns and operates, there's a couple examples that I can name, including Hangzhou Public Bicycle in China and U-Bike in Taiwan. With respect to number three, a couple examples include Next Bike in Germany, which is a for-profit company, as well as Cyclocity France, which is actually an advertising company. Okay. So what we're starting to see, which is not surprising in light of this growth that we're discussing in bike sharing, is a lot more vendors, providers, service models, technologies, including understanding. And many programs are considering a diverse funding range, and Denver B-Cycle, I think, has done a tremendous job of this by seeking out a wide range of funding sources. And one of their corporate sponsors is actually Kaiser, which makes a lot of sense from the public health standpoint. In Barcelona, biking actually funds their program through advertising and parking meters. And Montgomery County, which is considering bike sharing, I think in conjunction with Capital Bikeshare, is considering grants, parking district funds, tax credits, advertising, state bonds, etc. So those are some of the ways that these programs are being funded. And I thought it would be also interesting to note, in light of the comment about Kaiser, that Boston Hubway received, I believe, a $5.7 million sponsorship from New Balance. So there's a lot of activity out there to pursue as we look to the expansion of these programs. One of the things that we've found that programs are spending more time on is pre-launch considerations, as well as focusing on expansion approaches and really thinking thoughtfully about how to expand their programs. In terms of the launch considerations, key elements that come up are bicycles and stations, so determining what's the right number and where should the stations be located, but also marketing strategies are a key component in garnering a lot of attention and support prior to the launch of the programs. So as we look to determining the number of bikes and stations, we've seen from looking around the world that the most successful programs have deployed stations within about 300 meters or about 980 feet of each other to facilitate this availability. And you can see here I've listed a number of European cities as well as Hangzhou. And they range from about 820 feet to 1,800 feet with respect to their locations. Tools and techniques for determining where to site the bikes and stations are developing, and one of the approaches that's typically used is GIS analysis. And in fact, one of the things I wanted to mention to you is that there's a Transportation Research Board paper that was written by Criuzzi et al., and it's called Defining a Primary Market and Estimating Demand for Major Bicycle Sharing Programs in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And this paper used a raster-based GIS analysis approach, which I think a number of programs have looked at and contemplated when they were assessing how to go about this. And these types of geographic information system approaches have really helped a lot of programs determine where to site the stations and bicycles. But we have noted that when programs are too small or they are unable to meet demand, they often have difficult time succeeding. So scale is an important thing to consider as we look to deployment. Other types of tools that are used include mathematical models. In fact, I've read a paper about a Vlieb analysis that looked largely at asymmetry issues or rebalancing issues associated with the one-way model of bike sharing. And those are sometimes used to help cities evaluate different scenarios for where to place the bikes and, you know, evaluating what their costs may be in terms of rebalancing overall. But one of the things that this paper actually mentioned is in terms of being able to forecast the extent of operational cost and personnel associated with rebalancing is often tremendously difficult to forecast until you get on the ground. So despite the value of these tools, I guess nothing really stands for real-world experience. So in this slide, I wanted to highlight Capital Bikeshare and the fact that Capital Bikeshare is looking at expansion, which is not surprising given its tremendous success. And so many programs are going to be faced with this as they move forward. And in fact, in Arlington, Capital Bikeshare has drafted 4 distinct scenarios that they are going to be considering over the next 6 years to look at how they might grow given the principles that I'm going to talk about below, which they've embraced, which include that new stations should be within a half-mile maximum of other stations and preferably within a half-mile of an existing station. And this really gets to the issue of, you know, when you're trying to meet demand but also rebalance bikes, the closer those stations are in proximity to each other, the more helpful it is, and there's likely greater cost savings. With respect to the second bullet, new stations should be located in areas with significant presence of population, employment, and attractions. And finally, new stations should be located so bike sharing increases the reach of other modes, particularly public transit and walking. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about the marketing strategies, which are becoming a really popular way of getting the word out about bike sharing. And media outlets and social media have been playing a really important role in raising awareness, generating program support, and also allowing people to talk about where they'd love to see the bikes located in the form of crowdsourcing. Some examples that I wanted to cite in terms of marketing strategies include logos, websites. Again, I've discussed social media, the use of public relations campaigns to generate early awareness, including getting members on board, as in the case of Bixie Toronto, as well as bringing in additional sponsors. So these techniques have proven to be really successful in pre-launch strategies. And also another technique which we've seen used quite a bit by Capital Bikeshare as well as New York City in its planning is to hold workshops where users and potential users can provide feedback about station placement. Another technique includes providing demonstrations of the bikes so that people can get a handle on, what this might entail. Bicycle management. So this is a big issue in one-way bike sharing. And this has everything to do with the fact that you have a one-way service in which the bikes can go from one location to another location, and they do not have to be returned to that initial station. So oftentimes there's an asymmetry or an imbalance in the system, and so the bike sharing programs have to keep a close eye on redistributing the vehicles throughout the day to meet the demand. And a number of strategies have been employed, and I've got a number of examples here, including the use of electric vehicles, compressed natural gas vehicles, so alternative fuels in the trucks that are used to transport the bikes. Also, the use of onboard computers and real-time information that helps those redistributors actually locate where there's bottlenecks and where bikes need to be redistributed. So that's really helpful so that the truck isn't just driving around a circle and looking for where they need to jump in, but actually being able to target where their efforts would be most helpful. And Capital Bikeshare is doing this as we speak with rebalancers who drive vans, and they also use software and displays to help them do that as efficiently as possible. So in this next slide, I'm going to continue a discussion about bike management, but this is an innovative approach beyond using trucks, but actually by incentivizing riders to play a role in redistribution. And a number of techniques are being used, including price reduction and credit. Capital Bikeshare has a reverse rider rewards program that really helps them to shift the bikes around from empty stations to full stations during the weekday morning rush hours. In They actually allow extra 15 minutes for individuals that are going to relocate bikes for them from stations that are at a higher altitude versus a flat station. And overall, these techniques are deeming a lot of success. So this coupled with the low emission vehicles and the smart intelligence to help people carefully assess where they need to go to pick up bikes and redistribute are really valuable lessons learned. In the next section, I'm going to move on to safety and talk a little bit about the role of safety, which always comes up in the context of cycling. And what we're finding across the world in terms of experience is that a lot of the cities where bike sharing is occurring are not cities that were typically known for biking. And so there's been concerns about, how does this affect overall safety? And anecdotally, we're finding that across these programs, larger numbers of cyclists are actually making motorists more aware of through their presence and through their numbers, and they're less likely to collide with them because they're more aware of them. And this can also come out through the marketing strategies and the PR campaigns to raise awareness of cycling. But one thing we want to note is that if there's an influx of really new cyclists who have limited experience with cycling, that could raise safety issues. So training may be an important consideration to bring in to bear. So next I want to talk about, sorry, my telephone is ringing and it's distracting me just a bit. Okay, so no bike sharing programs to date actually require cycling education, but there is a lot of safety information that is displayed on bike sharing bikes and in kiosks and in pamphlets that are distributed. And then the final point on this slide that I wanted to make is that laws and legal measures can actually play a really supportive role in terms of bike sharing. And an example that we like to cite in our research is Bayleaf's approach, in which the mayor actually lowered speed limits, added more bike paths, and more one-way streets in conjunction with their bike sharing program, They Lead. And this overall actually helped to reduce private vehicle traffic by approximately 20%. Now, moving to safety and focusing on helmets, we've been doing some research in this area, and we found that there's a lot of debates about this. And the majority of bike sharing programs do not require that individuals use helmets. And what we've found is that in the programs where helmet use is optional, they tend to be more successful and there's higher use. But in programs where the helmets tend to be mandatory, these programs have experienced lower usage rates overall, including the Melbourne program. Although their program, by the way, has increased use quite a bit, it does not appear to be correlated as much with the helmet issue as it is with tourists using the program from our read of the materials. But I wanted to draw your attention to an innovation that we've come across that was created by Sandvault, and there's a picture of it in the upper corner of the screen. And it's a fully integrated helmet dispensing system where the helmets are sanitized, and this allows riders to get a helmet or actually even purchase a helmet. And they estimate the cost is approximately $1 per bike sharing session. So that's an interesting strategy for individuals that are interested in looking at helmet options through this dispensing system. And other strategies to increase safety include things that we can do with the infrastructure, including painting of bike lanes bright colors, to increase their overall visibility, and adding advanced stop lines to minimize potential turning conflicts. And in the next slide, I have a couple of pictures of these brightly painted bike lanes to demonstrate that for you. Okay. All right. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about bike paths, and what we've seen is more examples of expanded infrastructure in bike sharing, and there's many examples from across the globe where we've seen notable increases in the amount of supportive bike infrastructure. Paris increasing their lanes to nearly 400 kilometers in 2007, Barcelona up from 10 kilometers to 155, Germany, we've seen a tremendous growth to 31,236 kilometers in 1996. New York City built over 200 miles between 2000 and 2007 of bike lanes, and they actually saw an increase of 77% commuter cycling as a result of that. And then finally, in Mexico City, city officials have committed to building 186 miles of bike lanes to encourage cycling by the year 2012. In this next section, I want to discuss some technological innovations that we're seeing some great development in, and one of the examples is in the lower right corner of this, and it's actually a Capital Bikeshare flat terrain panel that displays transit connections, so really emphasizing real-time information to help people connect bike sharing and public transportation. And we have also seen the use of bike sharing to collect data, and we see this in the B-Cycle programs throughout the United States, as well as Capital Bikeshare, to document distance traveled as well as carbon emissions. The B-Cycle program typically uses GPS devices to track, and RFID tags and chips are also used as a strategy to collect user data. So some other fun innovations include the Spot Cycle application that is being used by Capital Bikeshare, Nice Ride, and the New Balance Hubway program in Boston, where individuals can access information through their mobile app, and they can find out how many bikes are available at particular stations. The second bullet emphasizes Bing, which is a product out of Denmark, which is a freestanding bike, so it doesn't actually require a docking station, and it can be checked out via internet and text messages. These bikes are tracked similar to the B-Cycle bikes by GPS tracking, and an interesting theft device includes that when the bikes are taken out of a designated area, the front wheel actually tightens so that it can't be used. And if the bike is outside of its desired area for more than 15 minutes, coordinates will actually be dispatched to the operator so that bike could be collected. So that's an interesting application. I wanted to mention that the Spot Cycle app is being used by Barclays Cycle Hire, Melbourne's Bikeshare, Dixie in Montreal, and I mentioned the 2 programs in the U.S. Okay, next moving into, I think the final segment of my presentation is public transit linkages. So, our review of bike sharing is that it can serve as a tremendous critical last mile solution, and it can be linked to a wide range of strategies, including rail, bus, and bus rapid transit. And it can serve as a complement to public transit by extending its range, but it can also provide more capacity if individuals choose to take a trip solely by bicycle. In fact, in our Hangzhou public bike evaluation, we found that bike sharing was serving as a connectivity device, but it was also allowing greater capacity on their overextended buses for individuals that decided to take the full trip using bike sharing. Multimodal linkages. So some of the things that we've seen out there is there's some really great examples. In 2011, Guangzhou, China was awarded a Sustainable Transportation Award for Transportation and Advances, and it focused on its world-class BRT system, which includes linkages to Bikeshare, but also it has nicely integrated bike lanes, metro stations, and also a smart card for payment that can be used among all of these modes. We have also found in Berlin that in the summer of 2011, so last year, that the Call-a-Bike system was combined with not only train, tram, subways, bus, but also an electric car sharing program. And that was all integrated through a single mobility card. With that, I'd like to conclude the presentation with just a couple high-level comments, and is that, bike sharing is been with us for a long time. It's gone through many generations and iterations, but in a very short period of time, we've seen tremendous worldwide growth, and there's been a lot of lessons garnered that we can all take advantage of in terms of furthering our understanding of implementation, business models, operational procedures. But a number of obstacles still remain, including, how do we make these programs sustainable, particularly in light of their short usage periods? So, how do we raise the revenues, given how short a time most people use these bikes, and usually it's within their annual membership or daily or weekly membership time frames. Helmet use, how does that impact the deployment of these systems? The lack of cargo space, exposure to weather conditions, although we're seeing lots of programs moving right through the winter months, including Capital Bikeshare. And as I mentioned earlier, there's this outstanding funding business model question, although, I think we're making a lot of advances in that area. I think more research and more sharing of our collective experiences will really help to advance bike sharing further. So I'd like to conclude by just acknowledging some of the folks that helped me with the research, including sponsors, California Department of Transportation, the Mineta Transportation Institute, 2 of my colleagues at UC Berkeley, Stacy Guzman and Dr. Hua Zhang. And I'd also like to acknowledge Foursquare Integrated Transportation, who provided me with a lot of details on the Arlington Cap Bikeshare expansion. And with that, I'd like to conclude my talk. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Shaheen. We appreciate it. We see a few questions coming in, but we want to remind you that, please, there's a little slide showing now where you can actually text in your questions, and we'll answer those after Darren Buck's presentation, which we'll go ahead with right now.
All right. Thank you very much, Matt, and thank you, Dr. Shaheen. That was wonderful. I'm going to basically hone in a little bit more on the Bikeshare and transit linkage specifically. And once I can figure out how to change slides, there we go. This is roughly what I'm going to go over. First of all, the why, sort of the value of pursuing a Bikeshare and transit linkage. The how, some existing things that we're seeing out there in the different ways that bike sharing is integrating with transit, and then the future, looking into some ideas on how that relationship between bike sharing and transit could potentially involve. One big qualifying note I'm just going to say up front is whereas Dr. Shaheen's presentation was based on some very good peer-reviewed research, this is based on a little bit of peer-reviewed research and a whole lot of Googling and going through the Virginia Tech research system by me. So please keep a healthy sense of skepticism, ask challenge questions. This is very much sort of an evolving framework that I'm trying to develop on the bike sharing and transit relationship, and your assistance is greatly appreciated. Okay, first of all, first and last mile trip importance. Thinking about how to get people to and from transit terminals is obviously important. No transit trip happens if a traveler can't reach transit. A well-functioning feeder and trunk network can serve many, many people, but it's not for everyone for every trip. And as this data shows, waiting time is perceived by riders as being over twice as long as riding time. So walking is also an option for travelers to do that first mile, last mile trip. But realistically, it's only available for those who live probably within about half a mile of stops. And again, it's perceived by riders as a lengthy addition to their transit trip chain. For some, bicycling and bike sharing in particular can expand the catchment area for a trip and streamline a journey by eliminating wait time for, say, a feeder bus. Or eliminate a lengthy walk. Two important qualifications to these figures, which I show on the slide from the Transit Capacity and Quality of Service Manual, on which I'm hardly an expert, is that they're highly variable. They're going to differ depending on individuals, the system, the availability of information like a next bus screen, the built environment, etc. And also the time savings over walking, or alternately the avoidance of waiting time for feeder bus service are givens with using a bicycle or bike share to get to a transit station, but we don't know how travelers perceive biking time in comparison to, say, travel time, in-vehicle time on transit. Avoiding deviations, here's another benefit we see. What I've shown is a couple of Google screen grabs off of my computer showing sort of a local sample here at USDOT, our bike share station. The most common trip in calendar year 2011 to and from our station outside USDOT was to and from Union Station, which is a major multimodal terminal for commuter trains, our subway system, and intercity and local buses. Workers in our neighborhood can take bike sharing about 2 very flat miles mostly via bike lanes to eliminate a predicted 6 miles of travel, or 6 minutes of travel each way. It can eliminate potential and variable waits for 2 transfers and save $2.15 in peak fare each way, which pays for an annual membership in Capital Bike Share in less than 18 workdays. For patrons of the commuter lines from the outer suburbs of Virginia and Maryland, both the time and fare savings and more predictable trip times in the first last mile at least makes the commuter train a slightly more attractive option for them. Service interruptions. Bike sharing can help out there as well. For example, here in Washington, D.C., the Subway Authority is doing a large volume of track work, and this work can be done safer, quicker, and cheaper when a line is shut down in the work zone rather than single tracking. So in October 2010, some track work necessitated shutting down lines running through the Central Business District here in Washington over the weekend, and Capital Bike Share, which was still then deploying their system, I believe they moved up deployment of stations in the shutdown area to allow people to use Capital Bike Share to bridge that weekend service gap. Another example, I just found this paper recently in a public health journal about how the Boris bike system, or Barclay Bikes, I suppose is the formal name for the system in London. Time series studies showed significant increase in bike share usage of the scheme in the days surrounding 2 transit worker strikes. The graph on the left shows significant jumps in usage, while the graph on the right shows some insignificant rises in trip duration. Operating cost recoveries. Very little data out there, at least that I can find. Here's the only data that I have available on operational cost recovery for 3 North American systems. This excludes capital costs. It's roughly analogous to fare box recovery for those in the transit world. For those who know about typical fare box recovery rates for transit systems, it's pretty noteworthy. These rates are relatively high. And for transit agencies interested in operating a system, this opens up the unique possibility of a feeder system that provides cross-subsidy to a trunk line service. Now, admittedly, that subsidy would be pretty darn small, but at least in relative terms, that's a good move. With regard to cross-subsidies, it's also worth noting that a major contributing factor to the different rates in D.C. and Arlington within Capital Bikeshare probably stem from the high revenue the system garners from short-term renters, mostly tourists who are found inside the borders of D.C. That revenue cross-subsidizes a lot of the outlying Bikeshare stations, which primarily serve annual members. So if we divided it off, say, Washington CBD and the tourist zones around the National Mall, from the remainder of the city, we'd probably likely see similar evidence of cross-subsidy. So, station co-location is another great way that we can facilitate greater transit and bike-share integration. An obvious way is by co-locating stations. The first example I'm going to present here is from the San Francisco area under the guidance of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. A mouthful. They currently have an RFP out to provide 1,000 shared bicycles at approximately 100 stations along the Peninsula Transportation Corridor. 60 of those stations are going to be around 4 Caltrain stations, which is their commuter rail system, I believe, up to 50 miles away from San Francisco to complement a dense network that they're going to place in the central business district in San Francisco. Given the existing excess demand for Caltrain's bike on board spaces, this is a great way to encourage and grow bicycle access to their transit system. Another example coming down the pipe is in Orange County, California, through the Orange County Transportation Authority, funded under FTA's Bus Livability Program grant. It's a system in its initial phase, which is going to link downtown Fullerton, including 2 university campuses, to the MetroLink commuter train line to LA and other Orange County destinations. University students, as you may know, have a demonstrated higher rate of bicycling, so providing these university populations with access to transit via bicycle is an especially promising prospect in development. The next local example, and Dr. Shaheen mentioned the transit development plan that Arlington is putting together. This is a map that I grabbed out of their materials online, and I highly encourage you, by the way, to click on that link or go to that link after the fact. And if you're an Arlingtonian like I am, and the guy sitting next to me is, you have an opportunity to comment on the 4 scenarios they've laid out. Anyway, Arlington placed all of its initial capital bike-share stations, which are the ones on this map, within a short distance to its Metro Rail subway stops. I'm going to see if I can do a little advanced webcasting here and circle. Here's my home station, which is fantastic. I can hop on a bike, and I've got my choice of 2 Metro Rail stations for the days I'm too lazy to bicycle here to DOT. Hop on a Metro Rail, get to work, hop the train back, and ride the half mile to my house rather than walk, because, hey, why not? Another popular trip in Arlington is from this area down here, which is a brand new mixed-use development, very dense, but somewhat removed from the Metro Rail system. Now, there are transit options, obviously, to get from here to Metro, but this is I think about a mile's distance, and this is a very popular trip, taking the bike share from this location to the Metro Rail station. All right, here's another map from the same Arlington plan connecting to bus lines. This is a map of their high-frequency bus service, which is 15 minutes or less bus headways. what this map shows is Capital Bikeshare is really located sort of along those lines, but not necessarily dispersed from them. This might change in some of the various scenarios that Arlington is included in this transit development plan. They outline 4 expansion scenarios, and at least 2 of them, and perhaps 3, would substantially expand access for people in other parts of Arlington to these high-frequency bus lines. Okay. The next step, I'm going to talk about system co-branding and shared mapping. This example that I show at the bottom here is from DC. It shows Capital Bikeshare. It shows the circulator bus line and the upcoming streetcar system. I should qualify, though, it doesn't cross organizational boundaries from the DC Department of Transportation to the area's main transit provider, WMATA. So anyway, the value, I've pulled a quote here from Transport for Suburbia, and just note that it appears, at least from my cursory look, that very few systems worldwide actually share branding with their counterpart transit system. Sponsorship and advertising is a further obstacle to sharing a livery like this. And then on the issue of maps and apps, there is a lot of potential for sharing here. Dr. Shaheen's presentation included a slide that showed a pilot program going on in the DC area by an organization that I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I believe it's Mobility Labs, taking advantage of information feeds both from the transit system and Capital Bikeshare to display merged transportation options to customers in locations such as coffee shops, which is pretty cool and takes advantage of publicly transmitted information. Really sort of shows the potential. Boston is another one that had sort of a solicitation, crowdsource solicitation out there to develop apps that would merge transit and bike share information for users. Talk a little bit about other ways you can enhance that bike share and transit integration. One is bicycle facilities. Specifically, I'm talking about bike lanes, trails here. It's important for bike transit integration generally. It's important for bicycling generally. But I feel it's especially important for bike share simply because you're seeing generally less experienced riders on a bike share bicycle rather than their own personal bicycle. You're also, generally dealing with slower, heavier bicycles where the speed differential between general purpose traffic is going to be higher. There's a demonstrated correlation between bike share ridership and bike lanes. The upper little map there just shows a half-mile sort of catchment area around Capital Bikeshare stations as they existed at the last part of 2010 into the first part of 2011. And the bottom graph is just a very simple bivariate regression between bike share station ridership on the vertical axis and the kilometers of bike lanes located within range of those bike stations on the horizontal. And there is a pretty strongly positive relationship. I'll also put in a plug here for Federal Transit Administration's new catchment policy that was released last year, which sort of officially establishes a nexus between transit stations and the bicycle facilities that are located within 3 miles of that transit station. There's eligibility for funding to be spent through the transit program to improve both bicycle and pedestrian programs. The pedestrian catchment area is half a mile, Matt?
Yes.
Okay. And but I think more importantly, it's sort of an indication to transit agencies, to road agencies, that there is a sort of an indication there that there's a range you should look at where the transit system doesn't necessarily end at the fare gate. Finally, put in a plug for the Highway Capacity Manual's new multimodal level of service in the new edition that comes out. I'm hardly an expert on the various details that went into that and whether or not it's a good what's in there, what's not, but it's at least a very standardized way that practitioners can look at exactly how easy it is for potential patrons to use bike sharing or bicycles to access a transit station. I'm going to hit on the issue of social equity. It should be acknowledged thus far in its young life that American bike share users fit a profile that at least compared with the general population or transit ridership doesn't necessarily match up. So providing a transit solution, if we consider bike share a transit solution that's only accessible to the existing demographics of bicyclists or bike share members, doesn't do much to promote the need for social equity in public transportation. One barrier to bike share system use is the need for a credit or debit card to securitize membership. A number of systems, including Minnesota's Nice Rock, Denver's B-Cycle, and Washington Capital Bike Share, have established programs to assist potential users of their systems who may not have credit cards, which are necessary for the purposes of providing operators with the means to charge a security deposit in the event of a bike loss, to access the system. To provide equitable access for low-income transit users to incorporate bike sharing as a part of their transit trips. Such models such programs provide a great model. I don't have any information on uptake on those programs, and we're certainly anxious to see them succeed. I'm going to talk a little bit about Montgomery County in general, which has a program that is just initiating itself. They received a grant through the FTA Job Access and Reverse Commute Program, which was established to address the unique transportation challenges faced by welfare recipients and low-income persons seeking to obtain and maintain employment. Many new entry-level jobs are located out in suburban areas, and low-income individuals have difficulty accessing these jobs from inner-city, urban, or rural neighborhoods. In addition, many entry-level jobs require working late at night or on weekends when conventional transit services might be reduced or not exist at all. So in an attempt to address these challenges using bike sharing as a tool, Montgomery County, Maryland intends to use a JARC grant to establish bike share stations at metro rail stations out in Montgomery County, and then at the suburban retail destinations that service workers have to access in a counter-peak direction. I'm going to move on to the brave new future, just a few ideas to put out there for consideration. One is incorporating round-trip rentals for transit users. This allows patrons to check out a bicycle in the morning, take it and store it at their work site, and return it to the transit station in the evening, opening up bike sharing to users who might not work in proximity to a bike share station. The first example is from Netherlands, OV Fiets. OV stands for the Dutch Rail Authority, Fiets Bike. The picture on the top is just about the coolest thing I've seen in a while. It shows their unmanned bike dispenser, and they allow their members to use transit cards to check out a bicycle for €3, which is roughly in the range of most local round-trip bus fares. Use the built-in lock to lock it at their office and then return it in the evening. The second is a pilot program going on in England called the Brompton Dock, which especially pleases me as a Brompton owner. It's sort of the same operating model. When a user checks out a bicycle at a station, rides to their place of work, but rather than lock it, they fold it up and just take it to their desk and then return it at the end of the day. The website's there. It's a $50 annual fee. I know there's a variable use charge, but I couldn't quite decipher the model. So, common fare card. This would allow seamless transfers between transit and bike share. It's a stated desire to move in an initial first direction on that, I think, with the San Francisco system for common account numbers. I read in their RFP and the Q&A, I'm going to quote here, "It is desired that proposed systems be compatible with Clipper. MTC would support use of the Clipper card serial number as a token to access a patron account within the Bikeshare supplier system. This solution will not use the Clipper card for payment or require any integration with the Clipper backend." And that's from the Q&A in their RFP. Hardware obstacles. with the different RFID reading systems, institutional obstacles with sharing access to account and technology, and for those who receive tax-free transit benefits, these are all obstacles for a patron, obstacles for allowing sort of a seamless move between modes. I didn't note this in the slides, but stepping outside the realm of metropolitan transit and looking at inner-city modes, another sort of common fare card opportunity is bike-share reciprocity between systems, which would be another way to make transit easier. My friend Andrea Hamry is sitting next to me. She came in from Minnesota. If she could have used the same fare card or fob to use Nice Ride to get to her Minnesota transit terminal, and then check out a Capital Bikeshare bike at a non-existent national airport station and come up here, she would have been the bike-sharing poster child. DC, New York, Boston, and then announced earlier today Chicago, all using a common hardware system. I'm going to talk a little bit about a very fun example that I just read about in a magazine and found the other day. It's a system called VeloMag, which I hadn't heard of before. It's in Montpellier, France, on the Mediterranean coast. Close to 500,000 people in the town. They have 50 stations operated and co-branded with the Transit Authority, and I'll note here this sort of runs counter to sort of the typical European ad-based concession business model described previously by Dr. Shaheen. They've got 1,500 bikes registered, around 800,000 rides in 2008, which is the latest data I saw online. What they do is they allow free day use, a la OV Feats by transit pass holders. It's a fully integrated fare system. They also have bike-share. They also have traditional bike-share memberships available for those who want to use bicycles to go from station to station around town. And then bicycle rentals at destinations around their transit system. Basically, the outer terminals of their transit systems go out to tourist destinations like the beach. And so they market to tourists an integrated transit pass and bike rental. So you can take the transit out to the beach and pick up a mountain bike and then toddle around, return it to the station, and then take transit back to the town. They did a bunch of other integrated transit and transportation measures, such as an active parking system, an integrated car share system, along with high-frequency transit and this bike share system. But they, on an increase of, I think, 24% in terms of service miles on their transit system over 10 years, transit rides increased 2.4 times, which is pretty darn cool. Last thing I'll talk about here is connecting median running transit to transit-oriented development. When those communities are separated from transit by a barrier to comfortable walking, such as transit running in the median. The example here is Reston Town Center, which is a development, rather compact, new urbanist mixed-use community nearby, where the town center, which is sort of the top half of the map in the gray area, is approximately half a mile from the site of a new subway station, which is shown by the arrow, for the Washington Metro Rail Silver Line project, with no parking plan for the station. And as the community continues to grow predominantly northward, are residents and workers going to walk over half a mile over a freeway overpass, and the green section running through here is, wow, that's bad. That is the WO&D, which is a mixed-use trail. However, to walk across it, I think you'd have to take just this bridge, basically, because of grade differences. Are they going to walk? Who knows? But with proper bike facility connections, maybe a bike sharing system could help ensure more use of this station by folks who are living and working in this community. I don't know what Jackson Mighty Fine Food and Lounge is at the bottom of the screen. I don't know how that ended up. It's transit-oriented pub grub or something. I don't know. Finally, talk about sort of a really odd idea that I had the other day about dynamic bike share supply. There's a lot of initiatives here in the research community that aim to deploy more dynamic management and operation of transit systems enabled by technology. The ICM program is an integrated management of freeway, arterial, transit, and parking systems within a corridor using ITS, and innovative practices or strategies enables travelers to make more informed choices about their mode of travel based on current conditions, and transit providers can respond to those changing demand conditions. The next one, IDTO, is a bundle that aims to use technology to enable things like connection protection and allow for on-demand travel by both transit and ride-sharing. And the outcome of these is hopefully a faster and more reliable trip, regardless of mode. Bike sharing has great potential to promote transit use on its own, I hope, as I described, but it can also participate in these schemes in transit that I described. Availability of docks and bikes at stations is a critical piece of information for users and operators, and systems already push this information out directly to users via smartphone apps and websites, and it's a vital component of using the systems today. One of the next steps we'll likely see in operating bike share systems as part of that 4G framework that Dr. Shaheen described is the use of a dispatch model and predictive analytics to keep systems in balance, that is, having bikes to serve demand at every trip origin and a dock at every destination. Initially, these are just going to draw on historical usage data by zones and maybe some other independent variables like day of the week, precipitation, temperature, etc. But perhaps one day we'll see the rest of the transit demand response system communicating with bike share system to allow for greater support of unusual demand at particular stations when conditions warrant, creating a dynamic bike share supply. Put a trademark for that. There's obviously a challenge, and this is just sort of an environmental stand of transit ITS deployment. Technologies with low deployment tend to be those that require coordination with highway or traffic agencies, including two circled measures here that would be required for a transit demand management scheme that included dynamic bike share supply, multimodal traveler information, and fare integration. Another solely transit technology. Automated passenger counting is another necessary ITS technology that isn't deployed or planned to a significant degree. Here's our fancy slide. And finally, my contact info. I'm trying out this Twitter thing. I encourage you to contact me by any means. I'm only here at FTA for another 2 months working on Bikeshare, and I'd really like to get a lot of ideas into the system here, refine some of this stuff. We have web addresses here for a new NACDO webpage that they've just put up on bike sharing, and they're looking for your input to lend your resources and discussion to there. Put the CUTR website on there, and I don't believe we launched yet, but we should by next week. FTA, we've cobbled together a sort of a placeholder page for bikes in transit that we're hoping to build in the next couple of months. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you again, Dr. Shaheen. What we'd like to do now is just have a few minutes for questions. I've tried to answer a few questions offline, and this is Matthew Lesh at FTA. So several of the questions have dealt with, okay, how do we get these things funded? What are eligible funds? I think in the next few weeks we're actually going to try to have that specific webinar as we're working with our colleagues in Federal Highway. There are some different nuances based on our different laws and what are eligible aspects of bike sharing, bike infrastructure, et cetera. The long and short of it is, what my understanding is due to some Buy America issues, there's more stringent FTA rules regarding purchase of actual bikes and how our legal interpretation of system is. So in any case, there's some nuances there. As Darren alluded to, we're going to try to get a website devoted to the topic up in the next few weeks that'll start to help answer some of those questions. So from that, let's just go down the list here. What type, and this is open to the folks here that presented on the webinar, Dr. Shaheen, if you're still available. What types of organizations or firms do you find most often help champion for these bike systems, parking challenges, et cetera?
This is Susan. I'd be happy to field that question. I've found that the cities and the metropolitan planning organizations are very, very big champions of the bike sharing systems overall. And then they seem to bring in a lot of the other players. And that's where a lot of the growth and interest of, I think, the public corporations come in, or the private companies come in, from my experience.
Great, thank you. And we can try to post some of these questions and answers. And again, this webinar will be is being recorded. And if there's any other follow-up questions, please contact one of us here at FTA. Another question here: do any bike sharing systems have something on board something on board the bike that shows the time remaining until the system starts charging? For example, for Cabby here in Washington, that would be 30 minutes. Darren, I thought you had a...
I know Spot Cycle, the smartphone app they've integrated a little countdown counter, and I have heard from a friend who guards it jealously as proprietary, but there's a small vendor somewhere out in the ether who is developing such a thing, but I can't say more.
So I think that's a great suggestion. I've also often wanted that myself. Next question: what is the research finding about average use distances, particularly as it relates to the revenue problem? Not sure what the revenue problem is, but from your research, what is the current time?
It's I participated through Virginia Tech in a group studio project where we did a lot of surveying of the 24-hour renters, who are primarily tourists and also just some folks sort of sampling the system. And we had access to some data that indicated that trip duration for those casual users was very high, even though there was a variable charge attached to using the system for, I believe it was somewhere on the order of 2 hours a trip for that 24-hour renter. Those really are sort of they're providing, as I mentioned, sort of a cross-subsidy. And I'm going to qualify this. I'm only talking for Capital Bikeshare. I really have no insight into the other systems. But that tourist revenue, they are going in. They stated a very high degree of understanding with the pricing structure on how it works and sort of their interface with everything. They seem to understand it, and they were just less sensitive to the variable price of keeping a bike out for, say, 2 hours as a casual user, whereas annual members, they are very rigidly, they come in under the $1.50 charge or whatever it is now, and I'm the same. I think the average trip is like 28 minutes or something like that. So if you work backwards on the speed, that's roughly 3 miles. But yeah, it's a big balance that I think it's going to be interesting to see how New York is citing their stations, because you do have to strike a balance between the annual members who are using it as part of their day-to-day trips, and then those casual users who provide a lot of the cross-subsidization.
Okay, thanks. Is there a typical mechanical profile for the bicycles in bike share programs, such as number of gears? Does that vary in all areas, with more frequent elevation changes, et cetera? The different manufacturers, actually I'm not aware, are there different gear ratios?
Dr. Shaheen probably has a more international view, but I think the commonality is most of them use proprietary sort of accessory parts like handlebar clamps, chain covers, wheel bolts, etc., to protect against component theft. Most of them use internal gear hubs. Most of them use 3-speed, seems to be the standard. I don't really know about gear ratio. Generally, they're sort of, because the bikes are rather hefty, I mean, they're geared to sort of optimize around 12 miles an hour.
Great. Are there any examples of any transit agencies that have integrated bike share transfers into their transit system maps? I think, this goes to a larger question of, how integrated has transit operations and bike sharing become, but I'm not aware of any that are actually doing any transfers.
Yeah, the VeloMag example I haven't actually seen a graphic of their map, but they certainly seem to indicate they do.
Are there any models for allowing an outlying location to create a remote station to serve an isolated employment destination or a neighborhood, locations that would have an unbalanced travel pattern, making bike sharing impractical? I think Darren showed a couple of innovative, European examples, that provide 24-hour rentals, et cetera, that you could probably look into. Are there any examples of bike sharing in smaller communities? And this was a topic of several questions. Also, any suggestions for communities with several large hills? So there was a couple different questions on rural communities. Susan, do you have any input on any rural examples?
Well, some of the smaller programs in the U.S. include Boulder B-Cycle and San Antonio B-Cycle. So they tend to have about 100 bikes or around 140 bikes. I think 140 bikes in San Antonio right now. So in terms of something more rural, we have not come across a planned program in that area or a deployed program yet. And with respect to the hills, I did mention during my talk that our unit at UC Berkeley is going to be partnering on a deployment project with City CarShare and to have an electric bike sharing program integrated into their car sharing service. And one of the reasons we're looking at electric bikes is the issue of hills.
Very good, thanks. So another question here, what existing grant opportunities are available at the federal level? I know that previously CMAQ, FTA livability grants, and stimulus money was used. That well is pretty dry at this point, right? Or correct? Yes and no. Certainly CMAQ is still available. We do have currently FTA. There are some livability grants that are open until the end of the month that would be available for bike sharing systems. Again, there is a interpretation right now that bikes might not be eligible aspect of that, but full other facilities, infrastructure, et cetera, would be eligible. But again, there are some funds available, and you can find more about that on our website.
I'd also throw in the FHWA TCSP program, and I have no idea where they might be in terms of a next grant cycle on that, or if they even have grants available, but I know there were several, or some perhaps applications under the TCSP grant program for federal highway.
I have a few other questions here. Stealing entire bikes looks difficult with these systems, but have there been problems with people stealing bike parts? I would think the bikes would be especially hard to protect from stripping at night. Any?
I know at least the Bixie bikes, which are the ones in service here in DC, Minnesota as well, they don't seem to experience that problem simply because they use non-standard tools to attach the vast majority of the parts on there. Even the seat post has a little catch at the end that doesn't allow you to remove the saddle and the seat post from the bike.
Yeah, they seem pretty bomb-proof,
Yeah,
right. They're designed to prevent theft and vandalism, and that's why I think we've seen such a low rate of those types of occurrences here in the U.S.
Yeah, and I think to Dr. Shaheen's presentation, there's been multiple generations, and over the course of 30 years, while they might have been as dispersed around the world as they are now, there's been some very well documented lessons through those third and going into the fourth generation. If bike sharing systems are part of an integrated transit system, or at least that is the goal, shouldn't bike share membership rentals be eligible for pre-tax transit benefits? What are the prospects for this happening? Well, that's a very good question, and something most of in the room would support. But we're still struggling to have normal bike commuting as part of that tax initiative, pre-tax benefit. So the good fight still continues is my answer. And just to coordinate with that is the National Bike Summit is happening next week here that we're helping support, and we're actually having a bike sharing workshop that some of these probably questions we're trying to document for further research and to answer some of those tough questions. Another question here, we got a few more minutes. You mentioned electric assist bikes. Any potential uses in the U.S.? Who supplies the bike systems? So as we heard, there's going to be a demonstration in San Francisco Bay Area. Susan, you might be able to help out with the manufacturer.
Well, I can't tell you who our manufacturer is because we have not decided yet. But a number of brands that are out there include Giant, High Mobility, e-bikes through the Elite Electric Bikes program. But there's a lot of different vendors coming out of Taiwan, and so we're carefully vetting our options at present. So please keep posted on what we're doing in San Francisco.
I'll also mention that the University of Tennessee, Knoxville has an electric bike pilot fleet, and they are.
That's right.
They are quite anxious to tell people about it, and I'd urge you to look them up. And I wish I could remember the name of the system, but I couldn't tell you who their vendor is either. But they have a neat little system sort of in development there.
Well, I apologize. I don't think we're going to get. There's a handful of other questions, and I think we have to end our time here. Phil, I think we can document these questions electronically and potentially get them answered on the website somewhere to come. I would also urge you to keep informed of the listserv, so where you found the information on this webinar. We plan to host several related to this topic and other issues. And I thank you for your time. Again, Dr. Shaheen, thank you. Phil, thank you. Darren, thank you. And again, thanks for spending your afternoon with us here at the Federal Transit Administration.